That's lovely. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. Okay, that's wonderful.
That's great.
Teddy, have you got something to say? Oh, there we go. Okay, it is Teddy saying welcome to Pet Talk from me, Anna, and Teddy, and our guest today, Sarah Fisher. Welcome,
Thank you. Hello. What a
Sarah.
very handsome Teddy.
Well, he will never ever dispute that. There he is.
Beautiful.
So I first met you at a workshop when Teddy was about, I don't know, 2.5 years old. And I just, to me, what you were doing was magic, because you were reading Teddy and all the other dogs in the workshop. And it was like somebody attending a foreign language class and watching somebody speak fluently and thinking, oh, I could never, ever do that.
Oh,
That's what you were like for me. And so it was your understanding of animals, not just dogs, animals in general, is something that I heartily admire. And
oh,
so that was why I knew you had to be one of my guests.
oh, thank you. Thank
so,
you very much.
so for people who don't know you, how would you best describe what you do?
I wouldn't say I was a dog expert because, in my humble opinion, the only dog experts that exist are the dogs themselves. I would say that I am at best, or what I hope to be, is a canine advocate for sure, and a canine educator, I guess, in terms of helping dogs live peacefully in the crazy human world, because without doubt, dogs need to learn really important life skills to help them feel safe. But I think it's really important that the animals are actually the pilot of their own learning experiences. So I wouldn't call myself a dog trainer. So I don't know. You can come up with a name for me.
Well, I think actually you've done um, a wonderful job yourself. What I would say is that as many people working with dogs, you are somebody who actually is training the humans, because Teddy wasn't learning from you. I was learning from you. And
Absolutely.
that's the key, is that you are there to train the humans and perhaps act as interpreter. That's what I felt you were doing. You were
That's lovely. But do you not think it's more about supporting rather than training? It's not that I have an issue with the word training, but if I think about that word, it implies to me that we're doing something purposeful at quite specific times for quite a specific goal. And I've been really lucky, Anna, to have spent 27 years learning from amazing animal educators, but particularly dogs, and particularly dogs in rescue. And what I've learned from these incredible beings is, A, they are so giving and forgiving, but also, if we actually focus more on providing income for the dog, we're not so attached to looking for outcome. And the more we invest in knowledge about the internal environment of the dog and look at ways we can help bring, maintain, establish harmony to the whole internal environment of the dog, the less disruptive the external environment will be. So for me, it's about sharing that joy of discovering that everything you could ever want to know about a dog, about our amazing companion, is there right in front of you. We don't need to sort of spend time teaching, specific components of quite important skills if we actually take time to stand back, observe, and then actually maybe modify our own interactions and habits. Because in my experience, so many elements that, or so many elements of that sort of training pathway are actually triggered by us, and therefore things that we might need to modify or change, if that makes sense. So for example, lots of adolescent dogs become touch sensitive. It's a normal part of the biological process. Adolescent dogs have an innate need to climb, to strengthen the vestibular system. And a strong vestibular system helps you feel safe in the world. So we don't need to invest a huge amount of time teaching dogs to keep all four on the floor if that's what somebody wants. Or I personally don't mind dogs being on the couch. I really like my companions being close to me when they want to be there. But if we are going to invest time in, you know, sort of going against nature to teach a young dog that actually he's not allowed to climb on the sofa unless invited or at all, we need to provide outlets for him where he can practice the skills that are telling him how he can thrive and survive. And if climbing wasn't a really integral and important part of development, there wouldn't be any play parks for children. So it's about learning and seeing, and how can we meet the dog's needs rather than what he can provide for us. So I'm deeply passionate about rewarding education and creating a rewarding education for both the canine and the human, as opposed to reward-based training. Although, of course, I use rewards in the education process.
Do you know, it's funny because it's one of those things that it doesn't seem to matter what trainer, behaviorist I speak to. A large component of the conversation always ends up being exactly about watching your dog, understanding your dog.
Right.
I think this is the clash that happens, because so often people have a puppy, very often it's the first one, and what they are desperate to make that dog behave in a particular way that is socially acceptable, makes life easier, etc., etc. And what is so hard for them to grasp and understand is that actually it's not quite like that. We have to work with the dog, and that learning to watch the dog, work with the dog, understand the dog is as important as learning an effective way to teach your dog to sit or recall. And I think that's a very difficult thing, because we are naturally, I think, as human beings, very impatient. We want, you know, to see results, but it's feeding that relationship, that bond, I feel, that is really going to help you to do that. If you haven't got that bond, it's so much harder. So that's why when I was at the workshop, because in my first year to 2.5 years, what I most wanted was to understand Teddy. One of the things that always used to throw me was when I used to hear people say, you know, watch their ears because you can see but Teddy has floppy ears. And so to the untrained eye, it's really hard to read his ears.
Sure.
You know, and you showed me, yeah, that's true, and that's okay. There are other things you can do, and you know, that was one of the things that I really appreciated being with you, was seeing how you did that, and just the fact that you were reading him despite his floppy ears gave me hope.
It's glorious ears. Well, that's it. You know, we say, you know, watch your dog and all of this, and I teach that. I teach observations. But it isn't easy. And also we have to explain what it is we're asking people to look for. And the way you interpret what I'm saying is going to be different to the way another person interprets what I'm saying. And what I hear, I'm going to interpret in a very specific way. So for me, it comes back to clarity in communication, and that process of finding how you can help both the caregiver and the dog fall in love with learning. And, you know, all of those 27 years being educated by the only canine experts that exist, have enabled me to stand back more, revisit many beliefs, revisit a lot of the learning that I'd experienced, and to find more and more detail. And I'm amazed at how much I miss. I know I still miss stuff. I won't know till next year or maybe next month what I've missed this week. But that to me is the exciting part, that we shouldn't be looking for answers. We should be always looking to ask more questions. And in free work, which has been a natural evolution from all the stuff that I've learned and sort of practiced over the last 2 decades, we set up kind of enrichment engagements for the dog, which enables that movement to slow and enables us to start identifying the shape our dogs make when they're engaged with a snuffle mat on a low stool, for example. And one thing that really jumped out at me many years ago was when people would come for one-to-ones, and I'd be, adding to their case history and taking more notes now that we were meeting in person. I'd set up some snuffle mats or something, so the dog had something to do as he was moving around the room and exploring the new environment, and that gave me time to start watching that dog. The guardian felt more relaxed because their dog was more relaxed. But some guardians would say, my dog isn't interested in a snuffle mat. But the minute we raised it, their dogs were suddenly really interested, showing that even in that first observation, the dog either wasn't emotionally comfortable enough or physically comfortable enough to explore that snuffle mat when it was flat on the ground. And it's those dogs that started to really get me thinking about how we present what we might determine to be enriching. Because if it's uncomfortable for the dog, it's not enriching at all. And we start to try and understand by filling in gaps and saying my dog gets bored. And that's not true. Dogs, in my experience, don't get distracted and lose focus. They disengage and they shift focus. And again, that question for me is always, why? What is it about that activity that's making it difficult for the dog? Am I not clear enough? Am I asking for too much? Am I creating conflict because I'm the only source of food? So if we start to introduce learning layers within the context of free work, where the dog can move at liberty and everything's removed if it's safe to do so, including the collar, we can start drip feeding some of the learning layers in that. And the dog then is invited to engage, but we're not the only source of food. So we're not actually asking him to come out of his comfort zone or maintain engagement for too long. And I've noticed dogs, if we start to teach new skills, we take what the dog offers and we start from there. The dogs will often sort of come over and engage once or twice and then go back to exploring the free work items that we've set out. And then they'll come back and engage for 3 repetitions and then leave and explore again. And those breaks, I think, really help the dog to process. They give the dog time, but they also give the dog choice. So when I used to say, we'll only do this for a few minutes, that was way too long, because actually when dogs engage, it's normally for a few seconds, and then that builds and builds and builds.
So you were talking about free work that you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit about that in greater detail? So what is it you're actually doing?
It's a really hard thing to explain what it is, but in a sort of simplified way, think of bringing enrichment activities to education. So I will have 4 or 5 what I call stations. So I might have snuffle mats on an upturned tub. I might have licky, textury things, not just licky mats, because actually they can reinforce some postural tension in some dogs depending on what's used and the height of the licky mat as well. So I'll use things that influence the dog's tongue through having different textures, like some children's play mat, making sure everything's safe. They've got different ridges but don't trap food. And the concept of free work really is about supporting all the senses, not just the 5 familiar, but vestibular balance and proprioception as well. And giving the dog the chance to be the pilot of his own body and actually explore a range of different movement patterns completely at liberty. So you can do it in a small space or in your garden or in a paddock or a yard if you're supporting dogs in rescue and they have a yard attached to their kennel. And it is about just, between 3 and 5 enrichment items. I'll also do like a sensory tray. So I have mini pocket snuffle mats and I put them all in a new cat litter tray for the dogs to root through. But I'll start looking at the dog and seeing what he enjoys engaging with. What does he actively avoid? How does he organize his frame when he's at the station? And if a dog can't maintain engagement with the station, how is he organizing his legs? How is he moving between those stations? Are we actually starting to unpeel layers and discover the dog's got undiagnosed pain? Because pain is missed in so many dogs, particularly those that are really busy. But as I always ask people, does your dog really have a busy brain or body pain? And obviously they can have both. So in free work, we start to establish what is our dog's baseline. What does he enjoy engaging with? What shape does he make when he's licking the licky mat type surface? Does he really like rooting through the snuffle mat? Or do we actually need to provide him maybe with banked snuffle mats to maintain interest for him? And that was something that my amazing little terrier taught me. I had to do hands off with her, she is one of the kind of early founders of ACE, what I do now, animal centered education, because I couldn't, the whole world was overwhelming for her. The sort of volume dial on her nervous system was switched up loud. So any noise, any contact, anything visually stimulating just sent her into orbit. It was just overwhelming for her. But by giving her control over a wide variety of enrichment activities and sensory exploration possibilities, she was in control of the noise. She was in control of touching different textures with her nose, with her tongue, with her paws, with her whiskers. She was in control of starting to explore plastic balls in a tub that made a noise. And it was her that inspired the ball pit sort of in 2008. I wasn't the only one that was going to come up with that, obviously, but these are, just some of the amazing things that my companions and my fosters and my clients have taught me. So the whole hands-free approach is beneficial for dogs that struggle with so many aspects of the human world. And from those early days of ACE, we're then really looking at the shape the dogs make, how they enjoy or avoid something. If a dog, we put different textures on the ground as well. If a dog starts to avoid everything soft like a yoga mat, you've again got to have that question mark. Is there undiagnosed discomfort in the dog's body? And Cookie Dough would do everything at lightning speed. So it was about helping her quieten and settle and really looking at her body tension. And as she started to release tension through the body by being able to explore natural movement patterns for herself without wearing equipment, without counterbalancing, because I've got the other end of the lead, we could progress actually quite quickly to hands-on body work using some of the gentle T-touches or some of the other, slow stroking and mindful touching that I'd learned as a human massage therapist many, many, many years before. So free work's just extraordinary. It's an absolutely life-changing experience for dogs and people, actually.
I love that, because there's so many things that you've talked about there, and I am passionate about choice and giving Teddy as much choice as it's safe to give him.
Absolutely.
And really, it's only the limits of my imagination, as to how much choice he doesn't have or has, as if I can imagine it, he's got it, that's
great.
That's the idea. And I think that's so important. And you were talking about your dog being extremely sensitive. It's so important because as human beings, we know how lack of control has a detrimental effect. It causes us to be depressed. It causes us to anxiety. It causes all sorts of things. And I don't believe dogs are any different in that sense. If they don't have any choice and they are either forced to do things or not allowed to do things, and it's a continuous thing, I think that's a difficult situation.
I agree, because there's so much incorrect information out there about, you know, if your dog climbs on the furniture, he wants to take over the world. No, he doesn't. He needs to strengthen his vestibular system, and he'd like to see the world from a different perspective, just like we do. We limit, you know, so much to keep them safe, but we also limit them so much because we don't understand actually how similar we are. And our nervous system's not that different. So we're not that different, and we're not that different anatomically either. Obviously, we're on two legs, we have a different collarbone, or you know, our shoulders are attached via collarbone, and that isn't the same in dogs. But and the brain's obviously slightly different too. But I can go on with a few more differences, but essentially we're the same. And I think that's why they make such incredible companions. And that's what my dogs are to me. They're my companions. They're my greatest tutors. And I think the human race would benefit from being a little bit more dog. But certainly here in this country and in others, I think we try and kind of instill almost Edwardian beliefs on our dogs in the same way that children might have been viewed. Your children should be seen and not heard. It's kind of like that for a lot of dogs. And I think some of that is fear-based, because people don't understand that it's okay to give your dogs some choice and let them be the pilot of their own learning experience. I think some people are so desperate to get it right so that they are meeting their dog's needs, they might sort of follow a checklist for socialization or habituation a little too thoroughly. And life isn't a checklist. Life isn't a checklist of anything. And if a dog has missed out on really valuable experiences when he's young, it doesn't mean that he's going to struggle for the rest of his life. Because when we stand back and think about rewarding education rather than reward-based training, we start to recognize the value of offering a range of sensory experiences to help increase the banking history, if you like, of this amazing nervous system. And the nervous system is absolutely incredible. So again, that's part of the observations in ACE, teaching people to recognize when the dog's becoming aroused. And that can be through excitement as well as through negative stress. And what people might need to do then to start just modifying some of those interactions to help that dog find a state of balance again in his internal environment. And there, you know, that the joy of just being able, somebody emailed me recently and said, I've adopted this young sight hound, and in the garden we're playing games, and for no reason at all, he just suddenly starts really mouthing my arm. And, you know, people have said, oh, we'll just, you know, leave or throw treats or go into the kitchen and wait till he calms down. But that isn't really helping. And I said, well, the key for me is he's adolescent, and you might be triggering a game that actually starts to become a little bit overwhelming for him, because quite often the human keeps that game going a little bit too long, because we know games can be a really meaningful part of a relationship. So next time, play a little, and then just scatter some treats and sort of explore the treats with your lovely boy, so that you keep that connection and you're building that relationship, but you're just building up the excitement, and then letting him take that breath, get him using his nose, so he starts to breathe through his nose, which helps to engage the parasympathetic nervous system, and watch for signs of sympathetic nervous system engagement, which will be tightening of the ears. We're back to the ears, Anna. the space between the top of the ears will narrow, the eyes will start to get bigger, and the eye might even go black as that pupil starts to dilate. So the earlier you can see even the hint that those postural changes are starting to occur, the quicker it is to kind of take that breath, regroup, and engage in a different way. And I said, if you might need some help on a one-to-one basis, come back to me. I'll be able to put you in touch with someone in your area. Didn't hear from her. About a month later, got this lovely email saying, oh, thank you so much. I just want to say my relationship's transformed. He didn't mouth again. I did what you did. I started to watch. I recognized the signals. I recognized, the duration of the game, and I haven't had to try and walk away or, to stop playing meaningful games with him. And it's those little tiny details that actually bring the biggest change.
That's so interesting because, very often people think that the dog is getting carried away with the game, but they're not recognizing that actually they are accidentally the ones who are hyping things up.
Yeah.
And of course Tug is the one that everybody talks about being a bit nervous playing with. So many people talk about being nervous playing with their dog. And I remember when I first was playing Tug with Teddy, he would get very excited, but as soon as he got very excited, my instinct was cool it down. And so I did cool it down. I would offer him things, in return for, and we would do a swap. And interestingly, one of the things that I might do would be some sniffing games, some find it games and things like that with him. So it was, for me, it was an instinctive thing, because my instinct said, if he's getting too hyper, then I need to cool it down, but I didn't want to stop it altogether. So I would do alternate, and then I'd go back to the Tug, because he loved it, and I didn't want him to feel like I was ending it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of do something else, come back, and to this day, there are two things he loves better than anything else in terms of interactions: Tug and chase. So he's still, the very first thing he does every single morning is grab a toy from his toy box to have a game of chase around the table. And so there's this wonderful game of chase, and then it always ends with a bit of Tug, and then I say, it's time for breakfast, and off we go.
Brilliant.
And to this day, and I'm so glad that I didn't get afraid just because he was getting hyper. So I'm very grateful for that. Of course, the other thing that he loves as much as that is sniffing games and search games. Those are the top three things that he could do all day. That is exactly what he'd be doing, besides lying on the sofa next to me.
He might love free work.
He would love free work. I'm going to be doing something along those lines now. I'm going to be setting up different stations for him, I think, of an evening.
It's really fun, and it's really illuminating. So you start to see postural patterns, because patterns, movement patterns, behavior patterns, they're actually in place from a really early age. So I always have a question mark as well around adolescent behaviors. Are they actually new? And quite often they're not. They were there when the dog was younger, a puppy, but we might have overlooked them or not really understood that they were relevant. So it's really interesting watching dogs at the stations. You might suddenly recognize that dog actually only goes clockwise, prefers to move round the free work setup to the left. And even if we then change the setups, we don't want to create inefficient habits, the dog will still navigate its way around the new setup to the left. And why might that be important? Well, if you're handling a dog from your left side and you're walking, let's say, I don't know, in the park, and the dog sees something that worries him and you want to invite him to turn away, if you turn him to the right and try and offer a treat because you're a reward-based trainer, are you actually rewarding the dog, or are you adding more discomfort and distress because you're turning him in a way that's uncomfortable for him? So when we start to observe these patterns, we obviously encourage guardians to go to the vet. And quite often things like arthritis in the neck, lumbar spine, hip dysplasia, luxating patella, hock issues, issues with the lower back, the lumbar spine, soft tissue strain are discovered, which completely explains why that dog was more sensitive to sound, struggled with a harness being put on, struggled even more being turned away because he was being turned onto a side that was uncomfortable for him. And all the dots start to make sense and get joined, and then we get to add some color to the picture that's emerging too. So it is back to observations and back to everything you could want to know about your amazing companion is there in front of us.
It's so interesting because the one thing I noticed with Teddy, he doesn't seem to be fazed with any type of movement. That's absolutely not the case, at least at first glance. There's nothing that Teddy says, well, I'm not going to do this. He'll run, jump over things, jump onto things. He seems fine. But the one thing, and this has been for the longest time, when I'm grooming him, so if I'm brushing his ears, if I'm brushing his paws, typical of many dogs, he doesn't like his paws being brushed, but he's definitely more protective of the left-hand side than his right-hand side.
Interesting.
So I don't, and I have no idea, because in every other respect, he seems fine. But this is
the question mark.
Exactly. And I keep thinking, why is he so protective of one side versus the other? Which means that he needs a little bit of coaxing. He's not, he's not going, absolutely, you cannot touch me there. But he's saying, can you tread more carefully when you're combing my left ear than when you're combing my right?
Interesting.
And that's always on my mind, because
there will be a reason. 100% there'll be a reason. We just got to find it.
Yeah. And so talking to you is making me feel like it's doubling my desire to know what is going on there. Why is it that he is more protective of one side than the other?
Well, one thing you can do, Anna, is get some licky mat type thing. But if you use the licky mats with squares, put something really almost liquidy in there rather than mashed food. Because if you actually watch dogs trying to get the mashed food, not all dogs will do it, they actually start to overarch their back and open their jaw to kind of scrape their teeth along the little square holes to access the food. So the concept for me is about helping them sort of release tension through the whole body by using their tongue. And also for us to be able to observe how they can or can't organize their tongue. Some dogs that are habitually handled on one side and really reinforced for twisting and looking up at the handler are so out of balance. Through best intentions, we've actually taught crookedness and imbalance. So lots of dogs are more uncomfortable through the left shoulder and the left side of the neck, and that left ear might not move as much. That might actually correspond to something in the hips, either on the left or the right. Sometimes it's on the same side. Sometimes that body tension will zigzag through the body. But when you set out a licky mat type thing, or sometimes I'll use low stools, or I'll put angles in as well for some dogs because it's easier for them to lick at an angle. Start, if you can, and Ted is okay with it, filming what is happening in the organization of his ears, his head, his neck, and his tongue, as well as the rest of his body. But start there, play it back in slow motion if possible, because you'll see even more detail, and watch how much movement there is or isn't in either ear. This is again one of the observations that we teach as students who are going through their the ACE courses online, is to start watching the movement in your dog's ears as he flexes his neck. Does he only ever flex the neck in one way? Does he tilt the head one way? Does he flex the neck to the right but have to tilt the head because he can't flex the neck to the left? And do you only actually see one ear moving? Because lots of dogs, you can see this beautiful ear flap moving as the dog's exploring free work and engaging with the licky stations. But the left ear, for example, might be looking like it's almost glued to the side of the head, or you might only see the tip moving because the base of the ear is so tight. So I'd get on that dog detective trail, Anna, and start exploring, because there will be a reason. And really encourage you to question everything, but never question Teddy, because the dog is always right.
No, not. Coming to think of it, of course, he primarily walks on the right side of me, which means he is looking to his left up at me.
That may well be a part of it.
So that could be a part of it. And one thing I would say is, I can say absolutely he does move both ears, because I can see he does move both ears. What I don't know is, does he move them equally? And I think the question to be asking now is, does he move them equally? So, well, that's wonderful.
Bear in mind, nothing is symmetrical in nature. You are going to find an imbalance, but the earlier we can find it, and the more aware we can be of not reinforcing it through trying to do the best for our amazing companions, the better movement your dog will have in balance for longer, because all these little anomalies will become more exaggerated as the dog ages, or if a dog actually sustains injury because they're not loading their body structures as evenly as possible. Doesn't mean they're having a hideous time if you see this imbalance. My eyes are a different shape, my shoulders are a different height, made worse by amazing riding accident many years ago. My ears are a different height, so my glasses sit crooked. I have an amazing, fulfilling life. But the difference is I can choose when I want pain relief, and a dog can't. And I think we miss subtle signs. Not saying that Ted is in pain by any means, but just for the benefit of people listening. Again, the quieter we can be, the more we can step back, the more we can question and really connect and observe, the better we can make the life of these incredible, amazing companions.
And that's why I love your work so much, is because you are so brilliant at the detail. And that's why, to me, watching you the very first time I had the privilege of being in a workshop with you was like magic watching you.
And they're going to make me blush.
Yeah, but it's exactly how I feel about what you do. And it's that detail, and that's the thing that I'm looking for. And yeah, I have been saying it for some time, that this has been going on for ages and ages, but there is that he's more protective of one side than another. I just didn't know what to make of it or how to investigate it further. So of course I spent lots of time watching him when he's running and playing, and when he's you
won't necessarily see it in fast movement,
but that's the thing, and that I know that, and that's why it's bugged me all of this time, because the one thing I know is that they are masters at disguising pain. And
are they just masters at disguising pain, or are we just not aware of what we need to look for?
Well, it's that thing, isn't it, that when they're playing, they're creating endorphins, which
and adrenaline, absolutely.
And that's what I was.
And when you're focused on something, you
exactly.
don't feel the same sensations in your body.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing, is that we often make the mistake of not knowing that they're in pain, because we see them playing, having a lovely time, being active, and we think, oh, they wouldn't be doing that if they were in pain. But that's not necessarily the case. And
they're more likely to be more active if they're in pain, because pain keeps the body in a state of stress. So it keeps the sympathetic nervous system activated. Adrenaline is a pain blocker, and that body tension drives more aroused behaviors. It's as we start to kind of help that body soften and relax, and the dog can take a breath and movement slows through free work, we start to see more detail. And I had a client in a shelter years ago who was really sensitive to the harness going on, and the team were amazing. They would have 2 caregivers go in and break it right down and do lots of rewards as they were slowly putting on this dog's harness. And he was really interesting, came into the room, didn't do free work then, but had sort of some elements of it around. And as I was sort of just dropping treats on the floor, he was trying, he could scent them, but he couldn't locate them. And I said, this is really interesting. I think he's so tense that it's inhibiting the sense of smell. And I certainly see that when I work with scent detection dogs. So we gave him a little break and he came back in. And the second time he was so relaxed, A, because he knew me, but also because we just let him slowly move and explore in that first session. He was so relaxed. He was on every single treat, Anna. But what was really evident, he was so lame on the left hind leg. And that process of just letting him be and letting him breathe and letting him move enabled us to immediately recognize the dog needed to see a vet. And it's then that body, if you think of discomfort, restricts and comfort expands. So think about even what your nervous system does. If someone goes, ooh, can I show you something really horrible? There's a high chance you're not going to go, yes. You'll probably go, ooh, and you'll restrict that movement in your body. You'll contract. And think about if a dog's pulling, what does our nervous system immediately encourage us to do? Withdraw, constrict, restrict. But actually that creates more tension. So we have to override that and kind of stay soft and relaxed and actually move our hands forward to release tension on the line. So dogs that are inhibited will run around, might be actually quite vocal, might be more triggered by sight or sound or body contact. But it doesn't mean because they're active and playful that they are free from discomfort. Far from it, in my experience.
Well, I'm actually a clinical hypnotherapist, and one of the things that I do
Right.
is I help people with pain, because
Interesting.
learning to relax actually helps to reduce pain.
Yep.
So I can, some of my work involves pain management and learn relaxation for the sake of pain management.
Great.
And so it makes complete sense to me that helping a dog to relax is going to help him relax the musculature,
Yep.
which is going to take the pressure off the nerve endings.
Yep.
And that's exactly the same as it
And
is.
give him a different experience too, emotionally, not just physically, of course, because anxious dogs quite often are way more sensitive to pain. And when they're pain free, they build confidence. So we've got this constant link between emotions and physical well-being that you just can't separate. People might go down the anxiety route, which is right. Some dogs are born with an anxiety bias, but quite often those sensitive dogs are physically sensitive too. So either their sense of pain is heightened for them, or they are really uncomfortable, and it is the pain that started to drive the anxiety rather than the other way around, if that makes sense.
So I guess I have so many questions.
If you don't feel safe in your body, you don't feel safe in your world, do you? You'll
Of
know
course,
that.
absolutely. So now, I guess maybe the question that many people are going to be asking as they're listening and watching is, how do I know if my dog is in pain?
Great question. Pain is personal. It's a personal experience for every being. But pain and pain expectation or pain memory can be really hard to identify, and chronic pain in particular is really hard. So again, for me, it comes back to slowing that movement down and starting to look for things like one ear not moving. Occasionally, one ear is going to move more than the other. But if you really start to recognize patterns, that actually your dog's left ear always looks slightly higher, doesn't move at all, regardless of the direction of the sound. Actually, his tail's only ever off to one side. Even when it's wagging, it only wags to the midline and then back maybe to the right. And actually, at the stations in free work, I see him leaning and maybe sticking one leg out to the side. And that actually starts to fit with what I've started to notice when the dog needs to relieve himself, whether he's squatting or cocking a leg. Does he actually maintain that position, or does he only ever lift up or stick out one hind leg each time? Does he need to keep circling? Can he maintain the squat? And actually, does he grumble when someone sits next to him on the couch? Not because he's trying to claim that couch, but because it's really uncomfortable when someone sits on the cushion that makes it move beneath those potentially sensitive hips. There's so much information there. And also looking at the coat. It was a dog called Sandy at the at a dog shelter who switched me onto how a coat will change depending on what's going on beneath that incredible, glorious hair. And from that moment, 26 years ago, I started to look at coat patterns in all animals, but particularly dogs. And it's really interesting where you start to see different coloration, not natural shading, but you start to see maybe more exaggerated swirls and curls. It might be a natural part of your dog's coat, but will be tighter, wavier, more raised over areas where there might be changes to the mobility of the skin. There might be dandruff. The hair might be drier or greasier. And actually that starts to correlate with movement patterns that we're starting to observe, or we start to recognize that when our dog sits, he only ever sits on one hip. So taking a picture of a dog in sit is going to give you some information, but it's not going to give you the full story. So I see in my dog what I call, the tale of two sitties, S-I-T-T-I-E-S. So if he is waiting for his supper or a chew, or feeling hopeful about maybe gaining a little extra treat from the cupboard, Henry will sit with his hind legs nicely parallel. He'll be quite balanced in the sit, even though he's got knee issues and hip issues. It's a really tidy sit. But when he's sitting with me on the sofa, it's what I call, the slouchy couchy sit. So he's kind of like slumped, just like us. We're not going to sit on a chair in an interview in the same way we're going to sit on a chair when we're hanging out with family watching a movie at home. So it's the same for the dog. But if your dog only ever does a slouchy couchy sit, can only ever sit with his back legs thrown forward and rolled onto one hip, you need a thorough vet check for sure, because there's a high chance that something's been missed or an injury has occurred that you didn't recognize, because dogs are masters at compensating, but so are we. You'll know that. Our body is in this constant state of micro management and filtering, compensating, processing. And those compensation patterns can be hard to spot unless you're really familiar with movement patterns in dogs, because our brain filters out stuff that's familiar to us. It leaves space for new experiences. So we tend to be less observant with our own dogs, and those changes might be so gradual and might start appearing over, many weeks or months, or for some dogs even years. So it isn't that you've been, a slack guardian. It's just that you might not have looked in your dog in that way. So go back over videos, go back over photographs that you might have had if you've been lucky enough to have your companion as a puppy, and start looking for these postural patterns. Don't, leap to conclusions based on one photograph, but start gathering all the clues and then sort of start embarking on that dog detective trail.
So the big thing that I'm always reminded of when I've seen things that you've done online or just talking to you right now is watch their bodies. Watch their bodies.
Yep.
Really know how they move.
Yeah.
Because then what it means is that we're in a much better position to notice if something changes.
Yep.
And then if something changes, we need to start asking why. And the reason that that's so huge and it's so important is because that can have a huge effect on their behavior.
Absolutely.
And so this is where we get to reactive dogs, etc. It's not to say that all reactive dogs are in pain. We know that that's not true, but there is going to be a substantial number of dogs who may well be in pain and be reactive as a result of that.
Absolutely.
So this is hard because we don't always know that they've sprained something or done something. And sometimes it's cumulative. It's not cumulative. So we this is why it's good to really know our dogs, and really know dogs is not just about knowing their personalities, but it's also about actually really coming to grips with their bodies.
It is. And also, it is, you might start to rethink some of the personality traits as well through better observations. So, for example, in free work, we make sure there's water available, preferably 2 water bowls, one raised, one low, but also the dog's favorite toy. No dog has ever behaved with a toy the way guardians were expecting. And not only that, dogs that were compulsive about balls actually ignored them or expressed some interest and actually then moved on to explore the other things on offer, much to their guardian's amazement. But what some of the dogs have done is, let's say dogs that were ball focused, who loved to carry balls with them all the time. They ignored their ball and other balls that we have available. If it's appropriate for a ball pet to be in that environment, it's not appropriate for all dogs for different reasons. The guardians were, I actually cannot believe my dog is not showing any interest or is quietly rooting for treats, but isn't actually picking the balls up. Then something has happened in the environment. Winds got up, hit some cladding against the side of the area where we were working. And at that moment, the dog ran to pick up a ball, stopped, could see the dog processing, dropped the ball, and carried on exploring free work. Other dogs, when their guardian is sort of starting to move with them in free work and the guardian does what we instinctively do without realizing, reach out to touch their dog, those were the moments that triggered the dog to run and grab the ball they loved. So these amazing guardians were saying, oh my goodness, I don't think my dog loves carrying a ball. I think my dog needs to carry a ball when I touch him or when I take him into environments that I thought he was comfortable in, but now seeing this, I'm starting to question. And it's those amazing light bulb moments as well. And I say, but we're going to miss things. I call them mistakes, MISS. We cannot know what's meaningful. We may have not ever had the opportunity to take time out just to be with our dogs rather than do. And that, again, for me, is one of the benefits of ACE free work. It's that lovely middle bit between being at home and exploring the world, because that's not appropriate for some dogs. It's not appropriate for some guardians actually either. And I want to support both. So we can help dogs remain curious. We can help them explore different movement patterns whilst enriching their lives through the engagement of all their senses by having different free work setups, maybe in one room or out in the garden, and shaping those free work experiences so they're different. every day or twice a week or once a fortnight, depending on, you know, what's meaningful for you and your dog. And through that exploration, not only do we get to be with our dogs, we also start to see our dogs with new eyes.
I am absolutely blown away by this idea, because regarding the ball, because so many dogs appear to be hyper fixated on ball games, and we always assume that it's because they really love them, and
Question?
maybe they do, but
Maybe they've
maybe,
become addicted to it.
yeah, and maybe the hyper bit comes from not being as confident and secure outdoors as we think they are.
And don't forget, maybe they're in pain as well.
We don't know, because one thing we do know is that a lot of repetitive
Yeah.
movements, which would involve, in catching chasing and catching a ball, that repetitive thing can actually cause problems for them physically.
Oh, sudden braking, fast turns, spilling, head over heels. It can cause so many problems for the dog on all levels. So again, it's about helping guardians modify those ball games, rolling the ball, teaching the dog to search for the ball, just dropping the ball into long grass. There's loads of ways you can modify those games. And again, it's often the human that actually keeps that game going. Dog isn't throwing the ball for himself. So again, if you need to do that to keep your dog engaged with you when out and to burn off steam, why? Keep those question marks coming, because it means that some need isn't being met, and it increases adrenaline and cortisol. You're running the risk of, constant micro injuries to the musculoskeletal system. And also, dogs aren't able to gather data from their environment. Have you ever seen a dog carrying a toy in his mouth, scenting? They can't. They have to drop the toy, put it down to explore the ground or scent the air. So again, it can be a useful support tool for dogs that might struggle in some environments, but we need to move beyond relying on it. And we also need to consider the impact that game is having, because quite often we throw the ball from the same hand in the same direction each time as well. So we're repeating movement patterns that aren't safe and certainly aren't efficient long term.
I think it is fair to say, watching some dogs, that and we're talking about ball games specifically because that's the one that's most common, is that they're displaying things that I would, in a human, say there's an addiction.
I agree.
And if there is an addiction, then my question would be, what is that addiction masking? Because that's how I would see it and I deal with people with addiction, various types of addictions all the time. And so when somebody is coming because they want to stop the addiction, then what we have to discover is why the addiction
What's
is there.
The purpose? Yeah, absolutely.
Because addictions are a symptom of something. Yeah. And so if we're now looking at our dogs and we're saying, well, if this is addictive behavior, then what's really going on? And I can hear people saying, oh, this is ridiculous. My dog just loves playing ball. And we're not saying that the dog doesn't love playing ball, but it's when it's.
But it's if it's the only thing.
Yes, exactly. It's when it's obsessive.
Yeah, and it's detrimental.
Exactly.
Potentially as well. So we have to be able to, like you say, unpeel those layers and explore other options.
And so this becomes very uncomfortable, because obviously we are their guardians, and we feel like we're doing something wrong. We should have known, or we're fake, and we'd rather not look at that. And that's not the case. It's because we're all learning. They're nonverbal, and we don't naturally speak dog, and they don't naturally speak English either. So there's so much scope for misunderstanding. And so it's the important thing is to ask the question and be open, and then explore and try different things. And I love what you said about mixing it up a little bit, still use
Yeah,
the ball,
that's it. Still
but
use the
use it
ball,
in a different way.
but just be more creative and just more aware. And I really understand why some guardians might rely on the ball and why some dogs rely on the ball. I totally understand it. I've, been lucky to share my life with multiple dogs over the years, and to have some on foster and many as clients as well, and obviously working with dogs in rescue. And I understand how people can end up going down that pathway and then they don't know how to get out of that tunnel. We had a dog in rescue who was so ball obsessed, and it did look like an addiction. I'm not saying it is for every dog, of course, but he was frantic in this training room. He could scent where balls had been. He was literally climbing the walls, trying to get up to training cupboards where a ball would have been. And the team had to do a sweep of the site, of the training room. This dog was beside himself. So we just did, do you know what we did? We just did. I said, look, let's just see, where can we just start bringing change? He was on a harness and a line. I said, just start stroking the lead. Just start stroking the lead, and we're just going to put some stuff down, see if he can use his nose. And the caregiver was just stroking the lead, and this dog, instead of being like moving 100 miles an hour, probably slowed down to about 80 miles an hour. And we probably had him in that room for no more than 4 minutes. And I said, okay, just take him out. And you could see the team sort of like, what is this woman actually doing? So I said, just float out. For some beings, that state of tension is so habitual. Even if there's a moment for a half breath, it can actually make the body feel really unsafe. So we're going to do this in really small increments, just as a suggestion, a possibility of just a slightly slower pace. And if I see a dog who's moving 100 miles an hour, move at 99 miles an hour, I know change is possible. We're already starting on that path. The caregiver came back in. She said, I actually don't believe this. She said, I carried on stroking the lead as I was taking him back to kennels, and a walker had obviously been out with a volunteer, been out with a dog who dropped a ball, and I saw it in the flower bed, and I thought, oh no, because once this dog held a ball, it was impossible to get it off him. There was a safety issue, obviously, leaving him with a ball in kennels. She said he looked at it and then he just carried on. She said, I cannot believe it. So I said, well, we're going to just work with some more dogs, and we're going to get him back out in about 20 minutes, just to let that kind of concept of moving at a slightly slower pace and taking a half breath filter through that amazing nervous system. He came back in. We started to do some direct engagements with 2 people, walking to 2 different stations, playing the bucket game, which is a brilliant game that I incorporate into free work devised by Chirag Patel. This dog was amazing. I feel really emotional when I talk about this dog. He suddenly stopped and he looked around the room, and his eyes that had been all red were going pinker. And he looked at all the other caregivers who were watching, so we were all taking it in turns to work with each dog, and he just started wagging his tail. And one girl burst into tears. She said, this is the first time this dog's looked at any of us. And I said, just these moments of bringing a little bit of peace to a dog is just, I don't know, I carry those moments with me, as you can tell. And we floated him back out, back to kennels. And this time he walked past 2 balls that had been dropped. So we don't need to work on trades and leaves and drops and all of that. Just need to start that unwinding process. And the same goes for, what you might call impulse control. You let the dog find a more peaceful rhythm. They become more thoughtful and less reflexive. That's why I call myself, an educator rather than a trainer.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I'm not surprised that you were feeling emotional recording that. I think I was feeling pretty emotional myself, just picturing it. And so I am eternally grateful for your time today, but just
Joy
actually,
to connect with you again.
just for the fact that you do what you do. And for that, I am even more grateful. So I hope that you will find time in your diary to come back to us at some point.
Definitely.
And
I'd love to.
and just thank you, Sarah. Now, if
Thank
people
you.
want to find out more about what you do and get in touch with you, how could they do that?
Oh, Tilley Farm, TILLEY, farm.org.uk is our website, in need of a huge overhaul. Or Ace Connections on Facebook is a really lovely group where people can upload videos, ask questions about all aspects of canine guardianship and animal care in general as well, and also explore ACE free work.
Wonderful. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.